right, good afternoon. Don Wenner here. We're going to get started in a minute or so. Welcome. Probably most of you are quite familiar with the world of Zoom by now, but you guys should all be able to see the chat box on your screen. Feel free to use the chat function, Q&A, ask questions throughout. And then I'm going to be taking the next hour to train on the lead execution system, and specifically how to build clear strategy and direction to your organization using a tool we call the compass. And then I'm going to get to turn the floor to my friend and elite member, Whitney, who's going to share his business story, share his building an elite organization story. I've had the pleasure of seeing it once before, or a version of it once before, and can't wait. I know everybody here is going to be inspired and motivated hearing Whitney's story in just a little bit. So with that said, it is, for those on the Eastern time, 5 Eastern, right on time. So I'm going to start here in a second. I am in a time zone right now where it is 11 a.m. on Thursday, as I am in Auckland, New Zealand right now. So if you look here, that is the big bridge and into downtown Auckland, and a big tall tower, if you can see it, is called the Sky Tower. So been here with my family the past week and a half, going to be here for 6 weeks here in Auckland, or not in Auckland, but in New Zealand, exploring around the country. And the freedom to be able to do this comes from what I'm going to show you today. It comes from building out a very clear plan, very clear strategy, and then putting the right people in place to be able to lead and execute. So with that said, let's get started. Again, for those who just jumped on, use the chat box, Q&A box, and we'll take questions. And then my good friend Whitney will take over here in an hour and tell you his business story, tell you his building an elite organization story. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and kick us off. So welcome. So all of you are in this series of trainings. You're in the very first of this series of trainings, whether you realize that or not when you joined us. We're going to actually, starting today, go through the entire lead execution system in the chapters, in order of the chapters of the book, Building an Elite Organization, over the next couple of months. And we're going to actually turn this series into a master class for people to be able to use down the road in a full series of content. And it all starts off with this first training with the first couple chapters of the book, which is on laying out the clear strategy and direction to your organization using a tool we call the compass. For those of you, and I was looking at the attendee list, I know a number of you are quite familiar with the lead execution system. Some of you are probably hearing about it largely for the very first time. Either way, you're going to get value out of what we're going to go over today. We're going to give you some tangible tools. Shannon, if you can drop those tools in the chat box anytime, would be awesome. And then I'll also be giving out a link in a moment as well. But Shannon will drop them into the chat box for you guys as we dig into the tool in just a minute. Before we dig into the tool, I want to lay out a little bit of framework, groundwork. So for those who don't know me, or we haven't had the pleasure of meeting, don't know me well, a little bit of information. So I am a father, a husband. I'm the CEO and founder of DLP Capital, author of the book we're here talking about some of the concepts on here today, Building an Elite Organization. For those who are not that familiar with DLP Capital, this is now year 17. Actually, this year we'll hit year 18 toward the end of this year. Since we started, or I founded DLP back as a college student in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Today, we have over $4 billion in assets in our management. We have been one of the 5,000 fastest growing companies in America for 10 straight years. Since we were large enough to make the list, we've maintained being on that list for 10 straight years. 2022 will become the 11th straight year when the report comes out later this year. We have closed more than 27,000 real estate transactions, over $9 billion, including over about half of that has been through acquisitions as an owner or an equity partner to other sponsors. And about half of the deals we've done have been as a lender, lending money to other sponsors, operators, developers, builders. been married to my wife, Carla, you see on the right there, for 12 years now. And then I have 3 boys who are all here with me in Auckland, and some of our good friends who flew in. Donnie on the left, Alex on the right, and baby Jacob in the center, who hopefully will be falling asleep in the next few minutes, and you will not hear him cry in this training. As mentioned before, I'm from Lehigh Valley, Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, is where I started the firm, but call St. Augustine, Florida, home today. Have for the last 8 years. Have a second home in Asheville, North Carolina, where we'll be welcoming you to come join us here in a few months, which we'll talk about. And spent a lot of time traveling with my family as per right now. Despite in that picture, we're all wearing Jaguars clothes. They are our local team in St. Augustine, who couldn't be more excited about how their season ended up despite last week. But I'm actually a lifelong Raiders fan, so wearing the Jaguars clothes there, they had a little bit better of a season this year. All right, so let's set the groundwork a little bit. Let me explain a little bit about this elite execution system and the tool we're going to use here today, or we're going to train on today, how this all started. So as I said a moment ago, 17 years now, we've been growing the organization, growing quickly. Actually, we've grown by over 50% every single year now for 17 straight years. And about 10, 11 years ago, we were about a 40-person company going through this kind of consistent, pretty fast growth. And I, like a lot of you, especially people like you who are taking time to be on a training like this, are out thirsty for knowledge, as I was out thirsty to learn and grow, and read a lot of books from a lot of experts, and was taking all these ideas from the Jim Collins of the world, from the John Maxwell's of the world, from the expert on marketing, the expert on hiring, the expert on, and trying to pull all this together. And constantly, I think it felt like to everybody in my organization, I was constantly just throwing out a new idea, and based on whatever I was reading and whatever I was working on, whatever expert I went to go to an event about. And finally, I read a book, probably a number you are familiar with, called Traction, on a operating system called EOS. And at the time, again, we were about a 40-person company doing, I don't recall exactly, but maybe $20 million a year in revenue. And when I read that book, it clicked, because there was nothing new there, or not much that was new to me, but to pull it all together into a system that everybody in my organization could speak the same language and understand and follow was really, really powerful. So we immediately went and implemented EOS and put in some of the structure. We put in a tool that EOS uses called a VTO, a Vision Traction Organizer, and started running a bunch of the principles of that system. But as we continued our growth and very quickly grew to 100 employees and grew to 100 million plus in revenue and so forth, as we were growing that quickly, we found it wasn't enough. EOS was a great system. It is a great system, but it wasn't enough. So we were still implementing and pulling concepts from other systems, like the 4 disciplines of execution, or from Vern Harnish, or from Jim Collins. And we were having to custom build tools and things that weren't a part of the system, that we couldn't find anything within the EOS system. And I say all this, again, with a big admiration for EOS. Gino Wickman, the founder, is a good friend of mine. He's the first person who read my book, actually. And the way he described it, and many others have, is kind of our system is EOS on steroids. And it's a version for organizations who are going to grow bigger and larger and faster, I think, than EOS is sort of built for. And that's where the elite execution came from. We said, we're not really running EOS after a couple of years, we're running something different. And we started pulling it all together into the elite execution system. And that was, 7, 8 years ago now. Then a few years later, I ended up writing the book, Building an Elite Organization. And I'll talk in a moment about why I wrote the book and how it came to be. But if anybody who has not written a book or has thought about it, how I went about it was I hired a firm called Scribe, who assisted me, and they helped me record these interviews of each chapter of the book, and each one took me a lot of time to prep and then review the content and then record the audio version of the content, and then I had to go back and re-edit it all. So it was 400 or 500 hours of time But the real time was that it took me, 10 plus years to build the systems, the tools, the processes, the information that went into the book. And I wrote the book for four kind of reasons. One was for our employees, our team members at DLP, so they could understand the lead execution system that we were running. Soon our employees, and for anybody here who runs the elite execution system in this meeting, soon our employees will not be reading Building an Elite Organization anymore. Only our senior leaders will. Our employees will read Building an Elite Career, which I just finished and will be published and out in June, which is the version of the book for a frontline employee. I wrote the book to help other sponsors, other operators trying to scale a business similar to DLP. And I'm going to talk more about that in a second. But I wrote the book to help impact the jobs crisis. I believe all the disruption, all the innovation, all the technology, all the things that are coming that are disrupting so many industries and causing so many jobs to no longer be needed is actually a really exciting thing and actually creates a lot of opportunity. But that opportunity, the new jobs that are going to be created, that are being created, are created by small businesses. And being able to not just found or start a company, but actually scale a company in this environment, in many ways has never been harder. Some ways it's never been easier, but it's very, very hard to scale a high growth, high profit business, which is the subtitle to the book, The Blueprint to Scaling a High Growth, High Profit Business. We want to be able to help companies grow and scale and create jobs. So we think that's a major crisis in America. And then we wrote this book to help the ministries, nonprofits, the social entrepreneurs that we support from our philanthropy, help them scale and make a bigger impact on the great work they're doing. And the tipping point to writing this book, and what kind of caused me to finally do so and then launch our elite membership and the technology that runs this system, and sitting here doing this training with all of you, was in December of 2018. On a Thursday night at about 9:30 at night, I received a phone call from one of our borrowers, one of our sponsors that we were lending to. And this gentleman, I'll call Alex, was somebody that we had been lending to for a few years, and somebody that when I would do events, dinner events, capital raising events for our investors, I would often talk about as a success story. Because when I met Alex in 2015, he was a small home flipper, flipping 8, 10, 12 homes a year. And 3 years later, he owned $150 to $200 million worth of real estate. He went from running a kind of a small construction team to having 40 employees, built a diversified portfolio. It had this tremendous growth over the 3 years or so since we started providing him the capital he needed to scale his business. And when he called me on this December Thursday evening, or late, it was really 9:30 at night. It took me back, and he called me in a bit of a scramble. He was all over the place. He was scattered. He was kind of rambling around, and it took me 5 to 10 minutes to finally find out why he called me that night. And it was that he couldn't make payroll on Friday. He had 40 employees. He couldn't pay them on Friday. And as he explained that he couldn't pay them, he explained to me that, he thinks his controller, his accountant was stealing from him and he had to fire him. And, he doesn't have any money in his bank accounts, doesn't know where it went, thinks maybe it was mismanaged. He starts telling me that even though he's got 40 plus employees, he's having to work 100 hours a week. He's having to handle everything himself because he has a bunch of people who aren't capable of leading. They don't drive results. They're not, performing. And because he's working 90, 100 hours a week, stressed out constantly, trying to get projects done, struggling to make payroll, feeling that, he's got fires all over the place. His wife got so fed up with it that he was not only not present, but when he was present, he was, irritated, he was frustrated, he was distracted, he was on the phone, he wasn't there. That she had just filed for divorce and was taking his 2 young kids. So all that happened this kind of week, bubbled up for him when he called me. And, until he called me. So now I'm, 30 minutes into this conversation, 20 minutes into this conversation, when I kind of finally understand, what's going on here. It hit me like a punch in the stomach. It felt like knocked the air out of me that up until that phone call, I thought he was a success story. I thought, we'd helped him so much, that we had done so much value. I brought so much value to him and his family and his business. When in the middle of that conversation, it hit me that we had completely missed the mark. All we had helped him do was provide him the capital and deals as well, helped him accelerate his business. We didn't do anything to help him with all the other areas of his business, which you could argue that's a lender's job, is to provide capital. But I've learned, the hard way over now, 17 years, that coming up with money, finding deals, being able to accelerate, drive revenue, that's only, one leg to the chair, per se. That's one of 4 quadrants, as we call it, to a business. And so we immediately then, I helped him make payroll so that he could pay his employees on Friday. And then we got to work and started helping him. We helped him hire a controller in his business. We started helping him look at his staff and figure out how to structure it, started helping him prioritize, started helping him kind of remove distractions, put systems around how he was communicating, started helping him run an elite organization. And then I started realizing that some of our other sponsors that we were working with, maybe they weren't in as terrible of a situation as Alex was, where his wife was leaving him and he couldn't make payroll, but their businesses weren't doing nearly as well as they could be, and they really weren't making very much money in a lot of cases, despite a lot of risk and a lot of growth, and despite we've all been in this really amazing real estate market. So we started helping a number of our other borrowers implement the elite execution system. When finally we decided we need to turn this into memorialize this into a book and really be able to bring this to more people, which is what we did now about 2 years ago, and is what launched our elite membership today, where we help about 40 different companies actively implement the elite execution system. And through trainings like this, our goal is to help a lot more organizations be able to implement the concepts from the book, implement the elite execution system. So let's dig in. Chapter 1 of the book, the elite execution system. Often entrepreneurs, I know we got a number of entrepreneurs in this meeting right now, don't love the sound of the word discipline. It sounds like a 4-letter word. Many entrepreneurs did not become entrepreneurs and started their own businesses because they wanted discipline, structure, accountability into their business. But discipline is not something to avoid, something to fear. Discipline is simply giving up what you want right now, short-term pleasure for what you really want, which for most of us is some form of long-term achievement and fulfillment. You need discipline to make improvement or implement change only until the habit or the discipline is built, the rituals built in your organization, and then you can focus on something else. Through discipline, through structure is what gives you freedom. Hence me being here in New Zealand for 6 weeks to start off this year. Discipline is needed in an elite organization in terms of thought, meaning strategy, direction, which is what we're talking about here today. Disciplined people who work in your organization, and then of course, disciplined action throughout the organization. As I mentioned before, acceleration, which is capital, deals, is one of 4 quadrants of a business: acceleration, operations, people, and strategy. Today, we're going to be talking about strategy. So the results of the elite execution system, as I've already mentioned, we've grown 60+% a year. I said 50 before, but it's actually been 60+% a year. This is, we just passed year 17 actually now. Not only have we had great growth, we've been very profitable in our growth, profitable as an organization and profitable for our investors. We've generated double-digit returns for all of our investors in all of our investments for over 10 years now. Since we started our funds, we run a series of investment funds. We've actually exceeded return targets in every single one of our investment vehicles in every single period. We did over $400 million of revenue last year. We have not had a 5-year period where we haven't 10x the organization, any 5 years you pick. And we've now helped over 50 companies implement the elite execution system, on average, having over a 300% growth in the first 3 years of implementing the systems. Here's our size and our scale today as an organization, which has consistently scaled, and these numbers will be much bigger next time we show them, due to the elite execution system and having clear direction to where we're going. And that brings me into the tool, the Elite Compass, that we're going to focus in here on the training. Shannon put the link to on our website where you can download both a PDF version of this tool and a Excel version or Google Sheet version, depending on how you want to open it, version of this tool. And what I encourage you to do if you're not driving is go ahead and download this tool now and pull up the Excel sheet, pull up the Google Sheet, depending on what way you operate, and have the tool available to you as I walk through this training. And I welcome you to think through, as we cover some of the big pieces of this compass, to allow yourself to think a little bit what comes to mind in terms of each of the areas. What do you think is your BHAG? What do you think is the purpose to your organization? And give yourself, what do you think are the key numbers that matter most to your organization? So I encourage you, as we go through this, to give yourself the ability to take this time you're investing with me, to think about your organization. Based on where you are today, you may have some of this dialed in already, and you might want to pull that up right now. If you already have values and have a mission statement, and have these things, pull that up and have that handy and think about it as I walk you through this tool. So the Elite Compass is a tool to help you pull all the different pieces together, all the different parts of the 4 quadrants of a business together into one clear plan. And what I found is so many organizations will go out and decide, hey, I really need to grow my business, and I need to figure out marketing, I need to figure out hiring, I need to figure out prioritization or process or a certain part of your business. I need to get really good at checklists. And you put all this focus around one area of your business. And when you do that, you end up, and this is why most organizations end up going up and down, right? It's why when last year we were on the Inc. 5000 list for the 10th straight year, we were one of 5 companies to have made that list 5 times or more ever, because it measures your growth over a 3-year period of time. So sometimes it's not as hard to get on that list one time to have a 3-year period of growth, but to stay on that list year over year and maintain that growth, most companies don't do it. They hit the list, and now they've got to go, they grew sales, but now they got to go put in process and hire people, and revenue goes down or doesn't grow very much. It stays flat. And so they go up and they go down, they go up and they go down. By pulling everything together, the operational plan, the people plan, the acceleration plan, into a strategic plan, the Elite Compass, it allows you to have consistent growth, profitable growth. So it starts with the Elite Compass and taking a bird's eye view of your company, starting with your values, your purpose, your mission, which is where we're going to start here. Relate those to your ability to attract and retain clients. And once you establish the foundation of the why and the what and the how, then you get into a lot more of the details to what are you going to get done here in this next year? What are you aiming to do in 3 years? What are your longer term checkpoints to your organization? Even though we're doing this, many of you are sitting by yourself right now, watching this or being a part of this training. I encourage you, after this training, what you want to do is do an off-site Compass Day with your leadership team, whatever that means in your organization. Whether that maybe you have a set leadership or executive team today, maybe you're a smaller organization and that's all your top people who get stuff done every day. But involve the other people who are key to your organization into drafting this. And we will actually be doing 3 Compass Days this year, live days at DLP's headquarters, where we'll help you and your leadership team do this, which I'll talk about towards the end of the training. So the components of the Elite Compass, and hopefully by now you've been able to download it and take a look at it, but I'm going to walk you through the different pieces. Starts with the purpose, why we do what we do, why. The mission, what we do, and the compass is going to tell us then where are we going. So I'm going to walk you through and cover these big parts of the compass, the big parts of your organization, through using DLP as the example. Because I found and learned that when you can see real life examples, it makes it a lot easier to then apply that to our own businesses versus just looking at a blank document and starting from scratch. So our purpose at DLP, which DLP stands for Dream, Live, Prosper, that's the start of our purpose statement, Dream, Live, Prosper, which has been what we were founded under those initials, many, many years ago, passionately making an extraordinary impact by transforming lives and building thriving communities. And our purpose statement tells us why. We want to transform lives and build thriving communities. There's nothing in this purpose statement, though, that's measurable. There's not a point in time per se that we're going to say, all right, we did that, it's done, we're finished. We can move on to something else. Because this is our why. This is why we're doing what we're doing. It's not saying what exactly we're going to do, what our tactics are, setting a specific goal to it, but more laying out what is the underlying reason that we're doing all the things we're doing. And could spend all day just on the purpose statement, but don't have that much time here today, because again, I want to turn us to Whitney on the top of the hour here, to tell you his building an elite organization story, which you're going to be quite inspired by, for sure. Then we get to our mission statement. Now this becomes measurable. Our mission statement, or there'll be a point in time where we'll say, hey, we achieved it. There's not a question mark to it. It's going to be, we've done it or we haven't yet done it, right? So our mission, which we just relaunched our mission statement. So we've been doing this many years, but every single year we look at our compass and we evaluate, is this still our mission statement? We changed our mission statement here this year. We raised the bar. And our mission statement now is to become the largest investor in rental housing communities and camps, which is an RV strategy, in the world. So the largest investor in rental housing in the world is our mission statement. There will be a day in time where we will not be able to say we are now the largest provider of housing, investor in housing, rental housing in the world. I know that sounds huge and that sounds, crazy. I do want to stress that when we draft our compass every year, we do not take the mindset of, aim for the stars and you land on the moon and that's still success. We achieve what we put into our compass. So much so that the greatest feeling of power I have each year comes from drafting the compass, because I've learned and seen, we've all seen here at DLP, year after year after year, that no matter how big of goals we set, we go out there and we achieve them. And what ends up happening is 70, 80, 90% of the goals we set for every year, we crush them. In many cases, we blow them out of the water. And then the 10 or 20% that we miss, we usually got pretty darn close to it and built and laid the tracks per se. Maybe we missed it by slightly, but we achieved the vast majority of what we set. And that's what makes this so powerful. If I went and set all these really big goals, and then, we then didn't talk about it afterwards. We roll out to our organization every year on Vision Day, which we'll gladly send you the recording if you'd like to see it. We get everybody excited, but then we talk about it all year. At the end of the year, we show how did we do against these goals. And when people see year after year after year, wow, can't believe we accomplished that. Wow, we blew that out of the water, even though we thought that seemed almost impossible at the beginning of the year. Guess what? Now people get bought in. Now they become committed. Now they work harder because we're all keeping score together, and we know that if we put it on this compass, it's going to get accomplished. Which is an important point of sharing the compass I sort of just alluded to. So after we draft this compass each year, we then share it not only with our entire organization, we share it with everybody. We actually, you guys, if you're on this webinar, you probably received email invite for us to join us on Compass Day back on, I think it was December 22nd. We invite all of our investors. We share it out to all potential hires. We share it out openly because we want everybody who's involved in us achieving our goals to know where we're going so they can help us get there. We take this compass that we're going to mainly focus on, and we then put it into an affirmative kind of statement that summarizes it all up in a really clear way, takes all these different components of the compass and puts it into this strategy statement that lays out where we're going to go. As you can read here, we will live our updated purpose. We will achieve our BHAG, which we're going to talk about. We will achieve our 2030 checkpoint goal. We will become world-class, best in the world at a few things versus good at many things, right? We summarize up a lot of the key components of our compass into this clear statement that we share out and communicate out, and helps us all very clearly be able to see and understand, where we're going as an organization. And and we'll gladly share our full version of our compass out and to all of you. I think it might even be in that link you guys have access to, but if it's not, we'll gladly send it out to you, and you can print it out or have it up as you work on yours and use it as an example or a reference point. These are our core values at DLP. Every year we go through, we say, are these still our values? Are these the things we're willing to die on a crossover? We're not willing to make any decisions that are contrary to these values. We're not willing to hire somebody who's not aligned with these values. We're not willing to make a decision, even if it's going to make us money in the short term, that's in contrary to these values. And we're actually going to be going through this summer and making some changes to our core values. We're planning to do it at our leadership event this summer, and we expect we'll have some tweaks to the values, which we've done a few times over the last decade. Our BHAG, our big, hairy, audacious goal at DLP, is to provide housing to 1 million people and positively impact and transform 10 million lives, which will lead us to being a top 100 private company in America on the Forbes list of private companies. We just updated this BHAG. For any of you who've seen it in the past, before it was to become a Fortune 500 company. When we realized, or neglected to, I guess, realize before that in order to be Fortune 500, we had to become a public company, which is not part of our roadmap, not part of our plan today. We want to remain a private company. So this BHAG, to provide housing to 1 million people and positively impact, transform 10 million lives. Guess what? Every person in our organization gets excited about this. Or if they don't, they shouldn't be in our organization. They get excited about this. They understand and see, and we talk about it. The impacts we're making, the solutions we're creating. People can be a part of this goal, be a part of us achieving what we want. They can connect their day-to-day job with the big goal of the organization. And I encourage you to avoid doing what we did in the beginning here. Yes, it's big, hairy, audacious goal. Big, hairy, audacious goal. The question there, Jim. And I encourage you to avoid doing what we did in our first few years of having BHAG, which in our beginning, our BHAG was to achieve $1 billion in assets under management. And when we set that goal, this was probably 2014, 2015, when we set that goal. When we set that goal, we were at about $100 million in assets under management. So for me, for Bob, our CFO, for our senior leaders to go from $100 million to $1 billion in assets under management, that was exciting. That was motivating. That was a big number, right? But what we learned is the maintenance technician who worked at one of our properties, the receptionist or delivering wow coordinator, as we call them, answering the phones, were not motivated by us going from 100 million to $1 billion, right? To them, 100 million was basically the same thing as $1 billion, right? Putting more money in the owner's pocket, per se, doesn't motivate, most people in the organization. So avoid kind of setting something that might be meaningful to you, but think of, is this something that's going to get somebody to want to come work here? Is this going to motivate everybody in my organization? And we believe this BHAG and our previous version of this BHAG does that. And we work really hard to help connect people to understand how they're making a difference, how they're impacting and transforming lives. We then go through in the compass and we draft, who is our core client? Who's the client that we're building our business to serve? And then we define who's our dream client. If we could find a small number of these clients, it would dramatically grow our organization. It would dramatically move us towards achieving our goals. So for us, our core client is a principal or owner with $10 million in assets and a desire to invest in real estate. And for us, that actually covers two groups. That covers the people who invest the money with us, and it covers the individuals who we provide capital to. And so we're looking for investors with $10 million plus net worth, and we're looking for operators with $10 million plus of real estate. And our kind of center of that bullseye for us is our elite members, which are sponsors such as Whitney, who again you're going to meet here in a little bit. who become part of our community, who we get to deploy our capital with, deploy our resources to, deploy our knowledge to, and help them scale their business and in turn scale ours. So that's our core client and dream client. Then we cover next big picture strategic part of the compass is your flywheel. And this is one of my favorite parts of the compass. And this is another Jim Collins concept. And the flywheel is, think of it as a fishing rod that, when you're trying to reel in a fish and it's really, really, really hard to get it going. And then all of a sudden you build enough momentum and it goes really, really fast. And it almost starts moving itself. That wheel starts going so fast, it's going down that hill per se, that it starts moving itself. That's what you're trying to create in a flywheel, that if you can get these components of the flywheel working together, the business propels itself and it keeps going and keeps picking up speed faster and faster and faster. And for us, our flywheel at the beginning, and this is unique for a real estate firm, doesn't mean if you're in this meeting and you're running a real estate business that this might not be yours as well. But for most real estate companies, the capital being invested is not the center point of the business. That's uncommon. We decided very early on that our core business was managing capital for our investors. That's our core business, not investing in real estate, but managing investment funds. That's our center of our organization. So for us, our flywheel starts there, with capital being invested by families. We like to call them faith-centered wealth creators, is who most of our investors are. These are mostly first-generation families who choose to invest with us. High net worth, ultra high net worth investors. They invest into our discretionary funds. And then we take that capital and we invest in housing. That's the second part of our formula, our flywheel. And we do that in a lot of ways. We do it as a lender. We do it as a joint venture partner. We do it directly as a sponsor. We do it in the ground up development of multifamily, ground up development of single family build for rent. We do it in value add, but it's housing. And then our third part, our secret sauce to our formula, which is what I'm talking with you guys all about here today, is we build elite organizations. We execute, right? There's a lot of people investing in housing, a lot of people who bought multifamily over the last few years who are missing that third piece. They are not running elite organizations. They are not executing. And they may have made some money because of how the market's been in the last few years, have a much harder time over the next few years. So we build elite organizations in our organization and in those we lend to and partner with our elite members. And if we do those three things well, we then are able to create prosperity for all of our stakeholders. We have 4 stakeholder groups: the residents who live in our properties, which are a really important stakeholder group, our team members, our employees at DLP, our investors, our 2,200 families invested with us, and then the sponsors, operators that we partner with and lend to, a part of our membership. Then our hedgehog principle, which is, what are you deeply passionate about? What's your economic driver, and what can you be the best in the world at? That's the concept around hedgehog. Due to time, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that concept, but a really powerful tool. We then lay out what are our strengths. We recognize what are our strengths that we want to leverage. For us, it starts with faith, and Christ, as we know, is our biggest strength. Our great team members, our incredible client base, the clear vision, our integrated business model, the way we structure our capital into discretionary evergreen funds. Then we also want to make sure we understand our core weaknesses, so we can either accept those are our weaknesses and build our business around our strengths and be okay with its weakness, or so we can fix those weaknesses. We list out all of our products, the future products we're going to roll out in the future. We then get clear about what drives our revenue so we can focus on it. So for us, it's capital being raised, acquisitions, loan originations, adding elite members into our community, and hiring the very best people for our organization. We have checkpoints to where we're going to be in 2030. And then we get into the very tactical side of, all right, so that's all the big picture. That's why we're in business. That's what we're going to do. That's what our big goals are. That's understanding who our client is. All the components we just went through. That's the big picture, foundational stuff, the 10,000-foot view part of the business. Once we figure that out, not that it's ever going to stay stagnant, it's always going to change and evolve. Then we start narrowing it. And so now we narrow into 3 years. and we say, all right, what's our 3-year aim? And it's very important that we think about it from this lens. It's a 3-year aim. At the pace of our growth, the pace of change, we're never going to be able to say today what exactly we're going to accomplish in 3 years, because it's going to change and mold in 3 years out. But we want to at least know where we're aiming so that we can set the right shorter term goals. And we want to be able to see where we're going. So again, we can set activities, actions that'll move us in that direction over the course of the current year. So 3 years from now, we've got some big goals. These are all of our key numbers, and we have a lot of them. I wouldn't recommend you having this many key numbers, especially if you have a much smaller organization. You know, we have 300 plus team members. It's still a lot of key numbers. I encourage you to think about your key numbers, and I encourage, this is an area for you to really take a moment as we're talking here and write down what are those key numbers for your organization. And it may be the easy things like how many deals you do, or how much money you raise, or things like that, or how much assets under management, but also maybe, you know, it's the performance, your NOI target, maybe it's your occupancy percentage, you know, your return to investors. What are the things that really matter? Maybe it's the amount of days it takes you to build a house. Maybe it's how many days it takes you to turn over an apartment. Whatever the biggest metrics are, that if you were here in New Zealand instead of me, or sitting here next to me, and let's just pretend, you know, you didn't have access to internet, you're across the world, and all you could do was call into your, you know, whatever, your COO, your head of operations, your controller, somebody in your organization once a week, and say, how are we doing on these numbers? Ideally, these 4, 5, 6 numbers, less is more. And they told you those metrics, how you're performing against these key numbers. You would know exactly how well your organization is doing. You would know if you're doing well or not just by knowing these numbers, knowing nothing else. So what are the most important numbers that would tell you how well your organization is doing? So these are ours in terms of the numbers we're tracking, and then the results of what we expect to do in this calendar year. So, right, so in this calendar year, we're going to fund $2.4 billion of deals from our funds. Right, we're going to raise that year alone $1 billion in capital. Right, as an example. And then we lay out in 3 years, what are the things that are non-negotiables? Even though we're saying, hey, this is an aim to where we're going, what are the things that no matter what, we are going to accomplish in 3 years? These aren't an aim. These are non-negotiables that we will 100% have accomplished these things, even if other things change, even if new opportunities come about. These are the things that will change or will happen within 3 years. So our 3 non-negotiables of what we'll have accomplished by 12/31/2025 are: we will have $3 billion of equity in our funds, our discretionary equity in our fund. We'll have a total of $7.5 billion of assets under management. We're at a little over $4 billion today. And we'll maintain our consistent 20-mile march growth. And we'll have now been, we've been 10 years today, we'll have now been for 3 more straight years on the Inc. 5000 list, so 13 straight years. Those are the things that are non-negotiable that will happen within 3 years. And typically when we set these 3-year aims, we end up accomplishing them in half the time, or within 2 years. Of course, I can't accomplish Inc. 5000 any faster than that, but the other goals we'll typically accomplish way before we get there. And then we try to say, all right, close our eyes and imagine, what does the organization look like in 3 years? We want to visualize, what does the company look like, and be able to see it almost like a painting. And so what we think the organization is going to look like in 3 years is we're going to have A players leading each business function and business unit with a strong leadership bench. We're going to have an average loan amount of $5 million. Today, our average loan amount is about $1.5 million. So we're growing our average size loan. We're going to have 50 elite members, at least 50 elite members that we have over $50 million of our capital invested with. It's a really important one for us. We will have 50 Dream, Live, Prosper communities. These are ground up development communities that we develop and build, delivered or in development. We'll own over $1 billion in our resort camp communities, our RV resorts. We'll have expanded into more products that we can, more sources of capital, more balance sheets that we can use to provide capital to our sponsors, such as securitization, CLOs, having our agency licenses. We'll have expanded and added in some institutional capital into our funds. So these are some of the things for us to visualize what we'll have happened, within the next 3 years. And then we get into the part I think is the most fun, and this is really the end of the compass, is the 1-year bullseye. So it's really fun for sure. I love working on values and purpose and mission and thinking about the products we're going to launch and what new business lines we're going to go into. It's a lot of fun. But I've learned over the years that what matters most is action that's moving towards a specific target. And that's what the 1-year bullseye is all about. All right, now that we know who we're serving, where we're going, why we're doing it, what are we going to do this year? What are the actions we're going to take right here, right now, this year? And then we're going to set goals for the next 90 days to make sure we achieve these goals for the year. So here at DLP this year, our theme is building for tomorrow. So even though you're going to see some of the big goals we have this year, we're really focused this year on doing some of the heavy lifting that doesn't necessarily pay off this year, but that we believe are going to pay off in us achieving our longer term goals, such as investments in technology, as an example. Every year we set a verse of the year. This year, in alignment with our Building for Tomorrow theme, we went with Proverbs 24:3, which Brian Yarnell actually is the one who brought this forward. A house is built by wisdom and becomes strong through good sense. Through knowledge, its rooms are filled with all sorts of precious riches and valuables. These are our key numbers for this year. These are the things we're going to accomplish in 2023. Then we break out the specific things we're going to accomplish, specific goals, targets that we're going to accomplish strategically, operationally, people, and acceleration. Strategically, we're going to make 4 really big moves this year. We're going to acquire at least one company this year, a big, large company, maybe another bank. Some of you might know we bought a bank last year. We're going to very likely buy another bank that we're going to merge in. We're going to positively impact 400,000 lives. We're going to have focused portfolio growth and direction. We're going to launch our Elite Impact platform, which is pulling all the different training and education and events and things we do into one clear platform. We can make the biggest difference. And this meeting we're in right now is a part of that launch. It's a part of that plan, pulling this together into a way that we can best provide the content, knowledge, and tools out to more people. From a people standpoint, we're going to have a clear number 1 and number 2 in every department. We're going to hit over 90% of everybody in the organization rated as an A player. We're going to establish 48 key new relationships. From an operational standpoint, we're going to achieve our portfolio-wide NOI across our portfolio. It's going to be a more challenging year this year in housing, right? In some ways, we're very focused on making sure we're hitting our NOI targets. We're not only going to hit, but we're going to continue to exceed our return targets to our investors. We're going to hit 110%. We're going to cut fat and some operating expenses across the organization. And we're going to make sure our long-term core technologies are live and in use throughout the organization. A lot of big technology work. And we're going to be prepared to win across the organization, prepared for tomorrow, building for tomorrow. And then from an acceleration standpoint, 2.4 billion of loans funded. For this year, we're going to have at least 25 of our elite members that we have 25 million plus invested with. We're going to raise 600 million of capital just this year. We're going to deliver 1,200 brand new units this year into rented units. We're going to build our brands, a number of things we're doing there, including rebranding our bank. And we're launching some clear acceleration tools and plans this year that'll be fully in use to help us accelerate consistently across all of our different platforms. So to recap the Elite Compass here, and I'll open it up to all questions. So please type those questions in. I think you can raise your hand and I can take you off mute as well, I think, but I'll have somebody confirm that for me. But at minimum, type your question into the chat box. To recap the Elite Compass, to build a high growth business, you need clear ideas for where you're going to take your business, a clear plan to get there, right? Those plans written down, and that'll start a chain reaction of action and results. All the tools here, not just the compass, but a lot of other tools are on that link that we put in the chat box a couple of times. It's there again, QR codes there as well. So feel free to take those tools and use them. This training, will be turned into a training, and this will all be turned into a whole series, masterclass series as well, which will become available to you. All right. So with that said, I'm going to open it up to questions in our last 8 minutes or so before Whitney takes over. So feel free. I'm looking at what's in here now. All right. So feel free to type them in. So Rock Spring question: if you were starting over from nothing today, what would be the one thing you would focus on creating for your new company? Doesn't need to be real estate, given today's current economy and social movements. It's a great question. And it's a tough one to answer in that, and I think this is sometimes where organizations struggle is they focus on, just kind of one area of their organization. And there's a few components in it, as I call it, the 4 quadrants of a business, and they have to work together. So I think the hardest part of growing a business from zero today, and the most critical component of actually being able to achieve success and achieve your goals, is having the very best people. But to have the very best people, you need to have really clear direction and strategy to your organization, to where you're going. You need to have that strategy communicated, so the best people want to come work for you. You have to know what kind of culture, what kind of values, what type of company you want to run, to know what kind of people are the right people for your organization. So I don't think you can just say one thing. I'd say a good place though to start would be to figure out your flywheel. Figure out what would be the components of your business that need to work together in order to have scalable results. I think starting with a flywheel is a great place. Most of you already have a business today, so if you really want to grow that business, you already have some foundation. Dialing in what that flywheel is, I think, is a really great place to focus in on, as well as figuring out your BHAG. Figuring out what's the big goal and letting that help filter and drive where you're going to go. What a lot of us probably in this meeting struggle more with is not figuring out good ideas or what we could focus on or how we could make money. But what we struggle more with is figuring out what we're not going to do, right? What we're going to say no to. And saying no to really good ideas, to focus on 1 or 2 really great ideas or opportunities, is the biggest challenge that most people struggle with. Warren Buffett has a great quote, says something like, the difference between millionaires and billionaires is billionaires say no more often. I just love that quote. So, all right, so great question there. Vaz asked about an execution plan. So that 1-year bullseye that I gave some highlights to, and when you look at our full compass, you'll see under each one of the targets, the things, such as having, number 1 and a number 2 in every department throughout the organization. Then we have a bunch of specific things that need to happen, projects, priorities, initiatives that need to happen, that then will lead to that being accomplished. And something I completely skipped over is that every single priority in our organization. So if I go back to our to the things we're going to do this year, like these numbers here, every single one of these goals are owned by only one specific person. So there's somebody accountable for each of these goals. And then underneath this goal, there may be goals that cascade. So in order for us to originate $2.4 billion of loans, there may be a salesperson on the team who has a target of 250 million. So their goal is 250 million, but the leader of that team is responsible for achieving the 2.4 billion. If you look at goals like achieving our portfolio-wide NOI, which is owned by Aaron, who's the head of our portfolio management, he owns that overall goal. And then there's specific priorities that need to happen under that goal that may be owned by members of his team. And then each portfolio manager on his team is responsible for hitting the NOI within their portfolio, and he's responsible for the whole organization. So that's how we go about executing. Then once we lay out these goals for the year, Then we go and we say, what are the things that need to happen in the next 90 days for us to achieve these goals? And those become our rocks, our top priorities for the next 90 days. All right, so I'm assuming it's Jim who's typing these questions in from Rock Spring. And I know Jim's been reading Tribe of Mentors based on his next question, which is, what's the best purchase you made for under $100? And you've never read Tim Ferriss's Tribe of Mentors. It's a really great book, and it's one of the questions he asks the couple hundred people he brings onto that book. The best purchase I've made for under $100, I would say, is Audible. And so we use Libro.fm, which is the same thing as Audible. For our company, we provide everybody at DLP with accounts there, and we let them all buy, download 4 books a month, no cost on whatever topics they want. So Audible or Libro is what I'd say. The app costs nothing, but the membership is, I think, $10 a month to download as an individual, to be able to download, a book or 2 a month. And that investment, I own a lot of books. But that investment of probably spending, $500, $1,000 a year on books has easily been the best investment. That 20, 30, 40, $50 I spend a month on getting knowledge from books, I'd say is easily the best investment I've made. Let me see if there's any more questions before we turn it to Whitney, which we're going to transition right into. All right, here's one from Tyler, sorry. If you had to start a fund over today and had none of the connections to capital that you currently do, where would you start? So it's a great question. I'll wrap up with that and then turn the floor to Whitney. So when I did start my first fund, it was 2012. I was in my mid-20s. People call it family and friends money. My family did and still do work at DLP, didn't have wealth. My friends were in their mid-20s and didn't have any wealth. So didn't have anybody to turn to for, family and friends money when I got started. So what I did was I leveraged any avenue I could think of. And so I both literally and proverbially pounded the pavement in every which way. So I went and looked at that time. What I had at my disposal was, I ran a successful real estate brokerage. So what I started doing was calling every single seller who sold their home with me and walked away with $50,000 or more at the closing table. And then I implemented a process on every sale that when they had their HUD, if the transaction coordinator would let me know if the client was walking away with any significant amount of money. And I started pitching them our investment opportunities. And then I was also, at the time, I was borrowing money from a couple different banks as a borrower. And so I reached out to the owners of those banks, who also are typically, many of the cases, are on the board. And they knew me from a borrower and knew my payment history. And one of those banks had a sale, and they sold the bank to a bigger bank. And that person who started that bank and 8 or 10 members of that board all invested with me. And that was my first big win. It was probably $500,000, but that was a lot of money at the time. And so year one of raising capital and a lot of talking to a lot of people, 99% of people saying no. In 2012 in Pennsylvania, value add multifamily in the Southeast was not known as a great investment opportunity. So it's probably raised about $5 million that first year, but I stayed after it. And the next year it was 20 million. The next year was 50 million. The next year was 100 million. The next, and last year was $473 million. So it takes time and effort to build those relationships and build that trust. But everybody's situation is a little different. Leverage any relationships, any credibility you have is the short answer.